Hi, and welcome along to a game of two halves. We are back here after the FA Cup weekend, joined by Mark Goldbridge. Both of us, no games this weekend because both teams out of the FA Cup. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Manchester United and Arsenal, the two teams that have won the FA Cup the most times, neither of us figuring in the quarterfinals. Crazy, Mark.
It is, and I tell you what, we were just talking about there. I think they've got this wrong. The FA and the Premier League. Like, we've just had an international break. Everyone's craving football, and then you completely say no Premier League. It's going to be an exclusive FA Cup weekend, and we all know that after an international break, whether it's September, October, November, or March, teams lose a bit of rhythm. So to have it as exclusively as the FA Cup, and then know that teams, I mean, look at Brighton Forest. That wasn't a typical Brighton or Forest performance. So.
No.
I think they should have had Premier League games at the weekend, an FA Cup midweek, or interspersed it a bit, because I don't think the FA Cup standalone this weekend really came out of that with anything. And I found myself sort of twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the midweek Premier League games and the Champions League next week. So I think they did it last year, but I don't think they used to do it, and I think they need to stop doing it. Like it didn't work for me having an FA Cup exclusive weekend, although we got some good results, I suppose.
Yeah, and I guess, like, you know, for the TV companies, not having a United, Arsenal, Chelsea, you know, no matter who, they won't say it, right? Yeah. But they would have liked one of them in there for those viewing figures and stuff like that. But listen, it is what it is, and let's just have a look at those games. Some different results. Let's start off with yesterday. Manchester City going through, deservedly so. They absolutely dominated the Bournemouth game. Should have been ahead before Bournemouth scored. Haaland missing a couple of chances. Went 1-0, Evan Nilsson, but then they equalised through Haaland, and then Mamouche getting the winner. Although Haaland, worryingly for City, because remember, this is the only thing they can win, and they've still got to get into the Champions League, which is not a given. He limped off, left the game in one of them big boots.
Yeah, well, you know, Man City is just a funny team, but you're right. The only controversial thing in that game, and as I still haven't seen a replay, and I don't know whether you clocked it, was that clearly something happened in the build-up to that second goal with Bernardo Silva. And ITV Sport is what I was watching it on. Never showed a replay of it. Never showed a replay afterwards. Still not seen a replay of it. And look, it probably was an accidental handball, but I think it's such a dangerous thing for TV companies to be doing. I know you know what production's all about. Somebody somewhere has said we're not showing that replay. Like, it's any producer knows that the consumer wants to see that replay. It's an entertainment sport, and for some reason they haven't shown it. And I just think that was really weird, and it's really dangerous, because I've noticed it a few times this year. Sometimes we're not getting replays on incidents we want. Like, I've seen it in an Arsenal game where, was that a penalty? And you think about it, and you never get a replay, and I'm just like, what's actually going on here? But look, apart from that, Man City deserved to win the game. Bournemouth were very disappointing second half, and I think with the squad they've got, they're going to miss Kirkes and Hulson, and they missed them. And Man City's bench, Mamouche, Grealish, Doku, they were the better team. They deserved to win it, but I think Bournemouth have dropped off a little bit, in all truth. Yeah, unfortunately.
Giving up leads all the time. You know what I mean? Remember, they were 2-0 up against Spurs, gave that up. Again, giving up a lead yesterday. They're really finding the pressure, getting to them a bit. It was light work for Aston Villa. I mean, well, I say light work. It was 0-0 at half-time, but in the second half, they dominated, won the game, and 2 goals for Marcus Rashford. Are you regretting it now? Are you regretting that he's gone? I keep asking you this.
No, I mean, I don't understand what people's issue is with this. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. If you loan a player out in January, Amorim's intention and United's intention is for Rashford to do this. You're putting him in the shop window. If he does bad, he's coming back, isn't he? If he does well, which he is doing well, people are going to, I quite fancy this. He said he wants a new challenge. Obviously, Amorim doesn't want him. As a United fan, I'm very happy he's doing well. And hopefully in the summer now, there will be people that go, there's 40, 45 million, and he moves on. It's good for him. He can see that there's a life beyond Man United. And obviously, I think United fans feel there's a life beyond Marcus Rashford. So he's doing well. And I tell you what, on Villa, I saw their bench yesterday, and I don't know what Villa are in such a precarious position, because they've got Brighton on Wednesday. They're not quite in the top 5. Can they win the Champions League? Can they win the FA Cup? They could end up with nothing. but they could end up with two of those things. But you look at their bench
and Champions League. Don't forget Champions League.
Yeah. Champions League. I think Emery's built a really interesting squad, and he had a very good January transfer window. I hope they win something or get top 5 because, but I don't. Yeah, they're an interesting team to keep an eye on, Villa, at the moment.
Yep. Brighton versus Nottingham Forest, not the most exciting game in the world, which surprised me a bit because I thought it would be, an entertaining game. But Forest do what Forest do, which is they make it very difficult for any team to play. And like you said, maybe a bit of fatigue from some of these players. Or I don't know, they just didn't look on it. They didn't look like the same Brighton or Forest that we've watched recently. Forest even rested. Well, Alanga and Hudson-Odoi didn't even bring them on till like later on in the game. But Forest getting through on penalties. Again, the third time. I mean, I think this sums up Forest because they are a very defensive team, right? But 3 penalty shootouts in a row. Now they're through to the semi-finals.
I think they're really hot. Funnily enough, for a team that's third, it's probably the least I've watched of any team in the top 10. I find them really difficult to watch. Like, fair play to them. And I think in Europe, they might actually do quite well. I think Nuno's style of football might do quite well. But I don't really blame them for Saturday. And I turned it off. I didn't watch extra time. I was absolutely fed up with it. But Brighton, I feel like they were just so sloppy. And look, that could have been a penalty for Forest. I know people say it wasn't a penalty, but I sort of agree with the whole VAR is meant to get involved if it's clear and obvious. I didn't think it was a clear and obvious mistake. I think I watched it. And I genuinely think he might be putting his foot down on the floor, in which case it gets caught. But I wouldn't have given the penalty in the first place. I agree. But when it's given, I don't know. My point is, I don't know what the referee is doing, overturning his own decision. What is he seeing that he thought he saw? But look, Forest won anyway.
You know what? For me, in those things, right? We blame referees a lot. Yeah. So the referees made the decision, said that's a penalty, and quite rightly that was overturned because he didn't touch him, right? Now, and certainly didn't. If he did touch him, the way he went down and that, it was not. To me, right? That is a player cheating. I know you should be given a yellow card. You know what I mean? We blame the ref. We'll be like, oh, the ref, why didn't he see this? But that's a cheating.
That happens tomorrow night. You'll want
cheating to me by the player.
Huh? That happens tomorrow in the last 10 minutes and it's 0-0. You'll want a pen. That happens
they all
against
do
Real
it.
Madrid.
I know. It sounds hypocritical. They all do it, but it shouldn't be allowed. I don't even
they should
like
start booking diving, yeah.
It's cheating, right? So then it'll be on the referee. Oh, why didn't he see that in the first place? The angle that the referee sees it from, it does look like a penalty. But when I
still think it looks like one. I do.
What?
I'm 50-50 on it. That's what I mean. I've seen it 10 times and I'm like, I still.
Well, you didn't have your glasses on when you was watching the TV or something. What's going on?
Probably, to be honest, I switched it off not long after that. I was probably half asleep, to be honest. But
it sounds like, right?
We're trying to make something out of this Forest Brighton game. We deserve a medal for this. We've actually created a couple of minutes of content around that, which is more. Our highlights are better than theirs. Let's be honest.
That's true.
It was bad.
It was a terrible game, but Forest are through. The game that I thought was quite entertaining, actually, was Fulham versus Palace. Well, there's a lot of goals in it.
Yeah.
And Palace, I mean, that first goal by Eze, I mean, he's quality, isn't he?
It was such a good game. I think Wharton was a bit lucky. I know we both got him in Team of the Week, but it was good because it was tasty. And I thought this is a good start for the FA Cup. Lunchtime game, Fulham Palace, London derby, Fulham at home, both very unpredictable in the Premier League. I think they've both done quite well. Palace, especially since Christmas. Wharton puts that tackle in and then he gives a kick out on Muniz and you're like, realistically, he could have got a second yellow for that and then it changes the game. But Palace played the perfect game. And I was saying this, and you probably know yourself, Robbie, but maybe some of the viewers don't. We played Palace away from Old Trafford a few weeks ago. And I found this amazing stat. Arsenal have got the best defence in the league. Crystal Palace have got the best defensive record away. They've only conceded 11 goals in the Premier League away from home, which is incredible because they're not even in the top half, are they? So as soon as they're 2-0 up against Fulham, I was like, well, that's it. They're so good defensively and they didn't even concede. So I think Palace's defence deserves such a big shout out because it's probably a bit of a hidden stat. To have the best defensive away record and be a bottom half of the table team, That is impressive. And they do defend really well. And then almost a little bit like Forest, actually. They defended really well. And then they've got players like Sarr, Mateta, and as you said, Eze, who just turned up with, really good counters. And it was a really good win for Palace in the Cup.
I think that Sarr's done really well, this season. Like, coming in, he's got to replace, what's his name?
Elise, yeah.
Elise's such a top quality player. And he's not Elise, he's not as good as Elise, but he's not far off. He's quality. He's had a really, really good season. He played well in the game. But Eze, I don't know if you have these type of players, Mark, players that don't play for your team, but you just love to watch. Even when they're playing against your team, you just look at him and you say, that's a player, man. Everything he does is quality. I just love the way he plays football. They're through. And so we know now what the semi-final is going to be. It's Manchester City taking on Forest, am I right? Yeah, Manchester City taking on Nottingham Forest. That won't be easy for City. I guess it being a
hard game to watch, I reckon that.
I think we already know what that game's going to be. Yeah. One team's going to have all the possession, the other team. But listen, they've already beaten City this season. So,
do you think City will win the whole lot now? I mean, that's why I wanted them to get knocked out.
Yeah, listen,
Villa might have a chance if they get to the final. I think Villa Man City might be
Villa got a hard game as well.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You just spoke about their defense. You know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting. City, obviously, the favourites. But I think any of those four could win it. But I think City's their experience. That's going to account for a lot now, isn't it? And the fact that it's the only thing that City can win trophy-wise this season, they're going to go for it in a big wave. So going to be really, really interesting. But of course, as you said, FA Cup's done now for the time being, and we're back to the Premier League games, which are going to be taking place this week. I'm just picking out a few of those games. Arsenal taking on Fulham tomorrow. Not that there's massive amounts in this game, of course, Willis. We know that the league, we know where that's going at the moment. It's going to Anfield. But what's going to be interesting in this game is that Bukayo Saka could be on the bench for Arsenal. Very significant for them ahead of that big game in the Champions League next week against Real Madrid.
Yeah, I think definitely this is the time of the year where, Jet2 Holidays could be sponsoring some of the games because people are thinking about the beach, aren't they? But I do think Man United and Arsenal are in a similar situation. Like, our game against Forest doesn't mean a lot in relation to the league and your game doesn't. But for Fulham, they've got an outside of chance of Europe. Forest have got a big chance of the Champions League. So, and Arsenal and Man United have got these European games where you can't just go, that's the focus. You need players working towards that, getting into rhythm. So yeah, I think they are both big games tomorrow night in the sense that the oppositions need it for Europe, and then Arsenal and United need it because they are in Europe and need to start, getting the players. We've got some injured players coming back. You've got some injured players coming back as well. So yeah, interesting. I was going to actually just mention that to you last night. Gyökeres story from Fabrizio Romano and David Ornstein linking into Arsenal. I would love this guy at Man United. He's played the Amorim system. He's got 42 goals in 42 games. He gets assists. I don't know what you're thinking at Arsenal about your striker, but I mean, I've heard stuff about Liam Delap and stuff, and I'm like, God, no. Arsenal need the Gyökeres, the Osimhen. They need the guy who comes in now, and he might flop. Anyone can flop, but you've got to go for that type of striker because that's what Arsenal are missing.
100%, Mark. When I saw that news last night, David Ornstein breaking that, I'm like, that is exactly the type of striker I want Arsenal looking for. Of course, they appointed a new sporting director yesterday,
I'm impressed with that.
Who's come in. He was at Atletico Madrid, and he's really got an eye for strikers. And it looked to me like Arsenal really interested in, and it still could be, but interested in Sesko.
Yeah, a bit younger than he is.
He's 21 and he's a project, and we don't need a project.
No.
Right? The exams are here now, right? There's no time for a project, right? And I look at Sesko and I think to myself, it reminds me a bit like Rasmus Højlund. That like, good player, good prospect, but do you really want to throw him right in the deep end straight away? Because if he comes in at Arsenal, the fans want goals. immediately.
Well, you need the
I
league
mean, right?
next year, don't you? It's got to be the league next year, I
It's
think.
got to go for the league next year. So Gyökeres, 30 goals already this season in the league, 29 goals last season in the league. Even when he was in the championship, 21 goals. That's exactly the type of player that Arsenal need to be signed. If you can't get, say, an Isak, which to me, I don't think Newcastle are going to sell Isak this summer.
Be perfect, wouldn't he?
Gyökeres, it makes perfect sense. And I was seeing that the release clause now could be as low as 50 million. It's an absolute no-brainer.
I just think if you're in the striker market, and it's different for United because we haven't got much money, but it's still not an excuse for me. You find the money. People want strikers. Arsenal want a striker. United want a striker. Chelsea want a striker. You've got Gyökeres, Osman are both available, and they're 26. And your only issue is which one you go for. Don't get either. I mean, Arsenal. I mean, I'm a United fan, obviously, but Arsenal have got it's the missing thing. Yeah. It's the missing piece.
It'd be criminal if we didn't. Right, but then I've seen a lot of criminal acts in our transfer market in recent times, right? So I don't even know. But the one thing is, this guy Berta, he's coming in. He's got a track record of buying good strikers. He bought in players like Luis Suarez. He bought in Griezmann at Atletico. He's likes a striker from what I can see. So
he's a good appointment. He is, very good appointment. I think he's better than Edu. He's better than Edu on paper, and he's very. We've had a bit of dealing with him at United, and he was linked to United, and very confident in what he can do. Backs himself. I think he's a good appointment.
Yeah. Your game against Forest, I mean, that will be a tough one for United, because that's away at Forest, a very, very difficult place to go to. And we see how they've been playing, and they do have a lot to play for. They want to secure those Champions League places.
Yeah, I think obviously the extra time won't have helped them on Saturday. It's a quick turnaround. But I think Man United had a little bit of momentum before the international break. They've had a big break, got a lot of players coming back, a lot of big games coming up. So I would hope to see a bit of, progression from United. And then Forest maybe could be in a bit of a Bournemouth mode where they've got to deal with being the favourites. They're the favourites in that game. I think Bournemouths and Forests and Brightons and Fulhams do well when they're the underdog. But the problem is you can't be the underdog forever when you keep winning. So I think Forest are the favourites for this game, and that might play into United. So I think I said a Forest win because you went with a draw. But I think the draw is probably the value bet. I don't see United losing it, funnily enough. Yeah.
A couple of other ones I just want to pick out, because we did do the predictions over on your channel, so people, you can go and check it over on Vats Football. But of course, Merseyside derby, Liverpool versus Everton. It was Everton who really derailed Liverpool last year from winning the league. This year, though, they can cement the league with a win over Everton. And it is at Anfield, where they have a good record against Everton.
Yeah, obviously before the international break, Liverpool sort of finished it on a low, didn't they? Champions League and then the Carabao Cup. But I said at the time, a lot of people were writing Liverpool off, and I'm like, very, 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 very likely that Liverpool are going to win the league. And when they win that league title, they're not going to be thinking about the Carabao Cup or the Champions League.
Yeah,
we had this chat. I'd ask you, Robbie, who would you go as like manager of the year? Because we were talking about it on the podcast yesterday that, Unai Emery could come in there, Arne Slot, Nuno, maybe even Arteta if he wins the Champions League. So I was just saying, the great thing is it's not Pep, but I do think Arne Slot coming into Liverpool, winning the league in his first season. I mean, that's great for them, isn't it?
I think even if Arteta did win the Champions League, it would still be Arne Slot. I mean, to do that in his first season, he inherited a good side, but to do that in his first season, it will be incredible. And to do it, how easily he's done it as well. I mean, you got to give him his flowers. The last game I want to look at is a big game, right? Chelsea versus Spurs. That's on Thursday, right? Now, both managers in this game under pressure. We know Postecoglou's under pressure at Spurs. Maresca's coming under a bit of pressure as well. They've been hitting quite a poor patch. And when you look at the league positions, Chelsea, they are in fourth place at the moment, but City a point behind on 48, 2 points behind them with a game in hand, and Newcastle. 2 points behind Chelsea as well, Brighton. A lot of teams breathing down their neck. If he doesn't get that 4th, 5th place, he could lose his job, Maresca. He's really got to start winning. And I can tell you, like, you know, apart from the North London derby, this is the next game for Spurs and Chelsea. You know, there's a lot of hatred between these teams. This is a real heated London derby. This is going to be probably one of the best games of the week.
Well, I remember you saying this on Friday that it's a big game between Chelsea and Spurs, which obviously, as non-Londoners, you get so many London derbies, you don't really know beyond Arsenal, Spurs, what the big ones are. 15 games Spurs have lost, but I mean, I think that some people are forgetting. Like, we've got the Champions League, got the Europa League, we've got the title that's going to be given out. But the big thing is that we've got 5 spaces for the Champions League pretty much nailed on. And the race for that is incredible. I mean, Villa Brighton on Wednesday will be very interesting. But this one, Chelsea need to win it. A lot of people are pushing Chelsea out of the top 5 now, saying Newcastle have got momentum and a game in hand. That gives them one. Man City, Forest, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea will be out. So, and that's not forgetting the likes of Brighton and maybe, you know, a couple of others like Villa. So I think that the top 5 race is really, really interesting. Yeah. And by the time Chelsea play on Thursday, Newcastle have probably won. The Brighton Villa game's done. So Chelsea got to win that. But then how many games can Spurs lose? There's still another 9 to go. They've already lost 15. I know they've got the Europa League. So I fancy Chelsea, but they neither of those teams really. I mean, a draw is not a bad result for Spurs, but Chelsea can't draw it. So I think this top 5 race, because relegations, we don't get relegation battles anymore. I think this top 5 race is really intriguing.
No, it is really intriguing, and that's going to be a great game. That's a game I'm looking forward to watching this week, because that is a very heated game, right? 2 teams that genuinely don't like each other, fans that genuinely don't like each other, and both teams needing a win, desperate for a win. That's the type of game I wanted to see that at the weekend, not these, you know, FA. You know, no disrespect to those FA Cup games, but they were a bit boring. But those are the games coming up this week. Mark, thank you very much. We'll be over on Mark's channel on Friday, of course, where you'll be able to see how we got on with the predictions of those games, and we'll be predicting the games for the weekend coming up as well. So lots of games to get through on Friday.
We're back. It starts now.
We're back. It starts now, right? But Mark, thank you very much. And thanks to you guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, to hit us up with your comments. We love your comments on these videos, right? And we'll see you again next week.